Chapter 13. Anna and Lisa stood with the El Paso detectives at the evidence table, examining the items they'd gathered from the Jacobs home. An empty gun case sat in the middle of a sea of personal effects. This was where Ben had kept the weapon he'd used to shoot Lisa and 4 security guards. Lisa pointed to a data lens beside it. "We went through the files from that back in Houston. Ben wasn't happy with Shaw." Detective Evans crossed her arms as she followed Lisa's gesture. "No, he wasn't. It must have been awful losing their house." "Is there anything here that stuck out to you, aside from the data lens?" Anna's eyes swept the table, but none of the other items appeared relevant. Reynolds shook his head. "Nothing much. We grabbed some DNA evidence just in case, but I don't think that'll be helpful." He indicated a medicine box. "The medication was all prescribed, and there's nothing interesting, no crazy pills." This didn't surprise Anna. Ben might have been struggling with sanity in the end, but if so, it was because a better way had made him that way. Unfortunately, nothing here proved that. She hoped pressing Mrs. Jacobs might give them something more. As if on cue, the detective's AI announced her arrival. "Detectives, Mrs. Jacobs is here. She's being escorted to interview room 3. "Thanks, Max." Reynolds surveyed the others. "How do we want to do this?" Anna nodded to the detectives. "I think you two should do the talking. I'm guessing Mrs. Reynolds doesn't have the best of feelings toward Lisa or me, given we were hunting him down." "Makes sense to me." "But if we're not going to be in the room, you have to ask her about a better way. As I mentioned, we have a lead that Ben was involved with them. If they planned this with him, we need to know." Reynolds gave her an amiable head bob. "Okay, we'll bring it up." Evans didn't say anything, but Anna saw the disapproval in her tensed lips. Mrs. Jacobs sat waiting for them at a metal table fused into the floor. She wore a maroon dress, a decent amount of lipstick, and her hair fell to just below her shoulders. The rim of her data lens was colored to complement the dress, and Anna wondered if she owned multiple lenses to match her outfits. She seemed the sort to invest in her appearance. Reynolds took a seat across from her, while a hovering bot provided an audio-visual feed so Lisa and Anna could participate from an adjacent room. Evans remained standing, maintaining some distance from the widow while radiating her typical positive energy. "We appreciate you coming in, Miss Jacobs. I understand this is complicated for you." Mrs. Jacobs took in a long, slow breath, then exhaled with a weary sadness. "It is. I still don't know what to think, Detective." Evans. "I still can't believe it. He was so gentle. He cared for his family so much." She looked up into a corner of the room, her eyes moistening. "I've loved him for more than half my life. How could he ever do something like this?" Reynolds leaned forward, playing the part of the experienced sage, the persona amplified by his close proximity. "I've been doing this job a long time. People change, or they experience something bad in their life and they snap. Often those who love them the most are the last to find out." Though intended to show compassion, the words landed poorly with Mrs. Jacobs. She wiped away a tear and glared at him. "And how many of those people were guilty of committing 7 murders, Detective?" Anna touched her data lens and opened a private channel. "This isn't helping. Change direction. We need her to tell us what she knows about a better way." Reynolds fell silent, and Evans picked up the conversation, taking a few casual steps around the room. "We understand you're in a difficult place. You're angry with Ben, but you cared for him deeply. All we want to do is gain a little context about his life before he went to Houston. From studying his data lens, it appears he was looking into the details of how you lost your property. We think he blamed Councilwoman Shaw." Mrs. Jacobs' eyes followed Evans, still flashing with anger. Her voice snapped. "Of course he did. Shaw's not from here, but she came and moved us off our land to make way for her favorite corporation. We all blamed her, and rightfully so." She paused, gaining composure. Ben never said anything about hurting Shaw. He wanted to expose her. Evans stopped moving, her attitude a tad less friendly. So, you were aware he went to Houston to confront her? Mrs. Jacobs hesitated, caught in a lie. Yes, I did. I'm sorry I told you differently before. I was confused, but I had no idea he had plans to hurt her or anyone else. He said he would bring her actions out into the open and show everyone what her policies do to people like us. How long had he been planning this? A few months? I can't be more specific. And the woman with him? Naomi White? The widow flushed. I've never met her or heard her name. I don't know why he was with her. He never seemed unhappy with me. Anna suppressed the first words that came to mind and opened the connection again. Ben and Naomi weren't lovers. We know why she was there. You need to ask Mrs. Jacobs about a better way. If you don't, Agent Williams and I will take over, and I'd prefer not to do that. Reynolds obliged. Mrs. Jacobs, are you familiar with the group A Better Way? Suspicion crept into her eyes. I am. I've been going to the meetups for months. Did your husband attend with you? Yes, but he didn't love going. He went because I did. Anna raised her eyebrows at Lisa, who made an O with her lips. When the detectives had asked Mrs. Jacobs about any new people in Ben's life during the first interview, she didn't want to mention A Better Way because they were her people she didn't want implicated. Ask her if they talked about Shaw in the meetup. Reynolds relayed the question. Did any of the meetups discuss Councilwoman Shaw? Mrs. Jacobs considered this. Sometimes. She hurt a lot of us. That's one of the reasons I've been going to that chapter. It felt good to listen to other people who were as angry as we were about what she did. Evans frowned and crossed her arms. What chapter are you in, Mrs. Jacobs? I've been attending the Mountain View meetup. Anna detected a shift. Evans hadn't expected a connection to exist between A Better Way and Shaw, and the revelation upset her. We meet at the Miller Theater. Was Shaw a frequent topic? Evans' tone had become sharp, and Mrs. Jacobs' posture stiffened in response. She came up sometimes, not every week. What are you implying, Detective Evans? I'll speak plainly. If your chapter discussed Shaw, that's an important detail. You should have told us that the first time we spoke to you. The widow stared at her, clearly unnerved. You asked me about Shaw, and I said we disliked her. Does it matter if we met with other people and vented? Evans uncrossed her arms and strode forward, placing her palms on the table. Yes, of course it does. Your husband tried to kill her. Her voice ended with a heightened intensity Anna hadn't expected. Mrs. Jacobs shrank back. No one at any of our meetups mentioned anything violent. That's not what A Better Way is. It's not the way my chapter is. Who leads yours? Carmina Lopez. I'd very much like to speak with Miss Lopez. I'm going to ask you again, what did you know of your husband's plan to assassinate Councilwoman Shaw? Mrs. Jacobs' head shook frantically. Nothing. I knew nothing. We never talked about anything like that, either at the meetups or at home. Evans picked her hands up off the table. We'll see what Lopez has to say. For now, you'll need to stay here at the station. She turned to her partner. Do you have any more questions? Reynolds thought for a second, then wagged his head. Nothing I can think of right now. Thank you for your time. Evans pushed away from the table and stormed from the room. Reynolds rose to his feet and trailed behind her, far less animated. Mrs. Jacobs looked after them, an unsettled expression on her face. Anna appraised Evans as she and Reynolds entered the room. Good work. There's a link to A Better Way here. Evans glowered. Maybe. Nothing is certain, but she should have told us that she and her friends were getting together to vilify Shaw. She had to know it was relevant. She did. Anna didn't add that it was clear from watching the interview that Mrs. Jacobs had held something back. Let's talk to this Lopez and find out exactly how much vilifying they did. If Lopez or anyone at the meeting incited Ben to violence, that's completely against everything I've experienced with A Better Way. Anna shot a concerned look at Lisa, who mirrored back her own skepticism. A Better Way were terrorists. Evans had been taken in by the positive veneer, but darkness lurked beneath the surface. She returned her attention to the detectives. I want to see where they met up. Let's visit the Miller Theater. Can we get someone to pick up Lopez and meet us there? Reynolds nodded. I'll get an officer to do it. I'll also apply for a warrant. Great. We'll want to look into their data and recordings of the meetups if they have any. They arrived at the Miller Theater to find it locked. It sat on the first floor of a 10-story building rising high up over a courtyard-like area and amphitheater. The floors above the theater held offices, and it shared the bottom level with a bank. Anna eyed the theater's enormous double doors. How long for the warrant? Reynolds checked his data lens. Maybe 20, 30 minutes. Might as well check things out while we wait. What do we know about the Miller Theater? Evans nodded at the building. I know a lot. I come here all the time. Reynolds flashed a mischievous smile. Wendy is the more cultured between the two of us. My evenings are less cultured. Lisa smirked. You know, Detective Reynolds, I'm starting to think you are my kind of people. Starting? I need to work on my first impression. Evans rolled her eyes. I've been telling you, you need better people skills. My people skills are just the way I like them. Why don't you give them a cultured tour? She laughed and looked from Lisa to Anna. Anna shrugged. Sure, we have time. The Miller Theater is a multi-use center maintained by the city. There's a troupe that performs plays here on a regular schedule, though it's also used for conferences and other meetings. The central location makes sense for a Better Way meetup. Lisa pointed next to the theater. What about the bank? The name Texas Trust adorned a sign above a cash machine set into the wall. Closed until Monday, the bank's glass doors and windows revealed only darkness inside. It's good business for them to be by the theater. People get cash for tips and such, or to pay the vendors who sell concessions for the outdoor performances. Lisa tilted her head, hands on hips. Neat! I can't remember the last time I used cash. Anna had always found it peculiar that in the world of instant transfers, some activities like tipping were still cash-driven. People argued that using physical currency was more personal. Of course, many illegal enterprises were cash-driven as well. Evans turned to indicate the amphitheater, a large wooden awning sprawling over a concrete stage in a dugout section of the lawn. Several rows of stone steps led down to it, providing both seating and access to the stage. During the spring and fall, the Miller Theater troupe often performs out here. Lisa appraised the structure with a critical eye. That sounds nice, but those stones look very uncomfortable. It's best to bring your own chair. Most people do. Reynolds pointed at the stage. I saw Screaming Armadillos out here last summer. Good band. Lisa glanced at him, curious. Local? Yep. They do covers and some originals. I've seen them a couple of times around town. Evans gestured at the building opposite the theater. Now, across the lawn is something I suspect you'll be the most interested in, the Cantina, a great place for Tex-Mex. Lisa grinned. You suspected right. I wondered if we'd have a chance to grab some lunch. I skipped breakfast. Anna studied the restaurant. It depicted Mexican hats on either side of its name, and strings of festive lights dipped over the patio seating, hovering in the air without wires. Is the food synthetic? A mix, actually. Oh, that's nice. This surprised Anna. Some places served both natural and synthetic dishes, but very few. Most often, if patrons were willing to pay for the real thing, businesses didn't want to taint the atmosphere with synthetic offerings. I think it's because of the diversity of their clientele. With the theater close by, they get all sorts, so they want to be flexible. Lisa waved for the others to follow and started walking. Let's go then. We have time to burn, and I'd love to try some authentic El Paso Tex-Mex. The restaurant wasn't busy, and they were able to grab a table to wait in view of the theater entrance. Not surprising Anna in the least, Lisa went all in and ordered real fajitas, but she kept it cheap with synthetic tacos. She thought they were quite tasty, and that she and Daniel ought to get more Tex-Mex programmed into their food MMD at home. As they ate, a notification from Guerrero chimed in on Anna's data lens. Anna glanced down at her plate and decided the call could wait. A message soon followed instructing her to contact the Houston office immediately. Lisa arched her eyebrows, but Anna shook her head and popped a tortilla chip into her mouth. It's Sunday. I'd normally be off. At the very least, I should get a day off from her. Lisa laughed. I'm not judging. Anna was finishing her last taco when Simon spoke into her ear. Carmina Lopez is here. She looked up and saw 2 uniformed officers approaching the theater with a woman she assumed was Lopez. Putting her napkin on the plate, she stood up. Break's over. Lisa grabbed one final chip and joined her, and the 4 made their way out of the restaurant and across the lawn. Carmina Lopez was dressed casually, her clothes hanging loosely off her petite frame. She held a tablet to her breast, and at the moment her eyes tightened as she watched the agents and detectives approach. Carmina Lopez? Anna only half asked the question. Yes, she clipped the affirmative. You are Detective Agent Flynn. This is my partner, Agent Williams. They sent their identifications to her data lens, Reynolds and Evans doing the same. Reynolds stepped forward. Evans and I are local detectives. My name is Reynolds. Lopez eyed the group. There are a lot of you. Anna nodded. It's a big investigation, multi-city in fact. Agent Williams and I are from Houston. I'd ask what brings you out here, but at the moment I'm more concerned about what brings me out here. We'll explain everything, but first, why don't we speak inside? I suppose, if that's what you want. Lopez turned to the theater doors and waved her hand so the left one disappeared, then entered the building. Anna followed and found herself in a mid-sized lobby. Bright lighting illuminated the red carpet and dark-paneled walls. 3 ticket windows lined the left side of the room, while posters for various plays and events surrounded the pair of curtains leading into the main theater. One of the posters advertised for A Better Way, promising to transform the unified states into a place of abundance and equality for all, and inviting those interested to come on Tuesday evenings. A door on the right-hand side of the room stood open, revealing an office. Lisa, Reynolds, and Evans came in after her, leaving the 2 cops behind to wait outside. Lopez moved toward the open door. Let's talk in my office. We can squeeze in. They trailed her into the room, which was a decent size, but not meant for a meeting of 5. Lopez used her tablet to assemble enough chairs for everyone to sit, then sat down at a small utilitarian desk and placed her device down beside a keyboard. Dropping her hands into her lap, she peered at Anna. So, what can I do for you, Agent Flynn? Anna motioned to her data lens. I need to make you aware that this conversation is being recorded. I assumed this much. With that formality out of the way, Anna surveyed the room. What do you do here at the theater that allows you to have your own office? I lead the Miller Theater Drama Troupe as well as a local chapter of A Better Way. That second position is what we need to discuss with you. Lopez sighed. I figured when the police showed up at my house, it's not uncommon for certain assumptions to be made about what we do, what with so many groups like ours turning to illegal activities. But yours is different? Yes, ours is different. She didn't elaborate, but Anna wasn't ready to let the topic go. Help me out, Ms. Lopez. If you're different, tell me why. Lopez's face broke into an overwide smile. Are you considering joining us? You can come back on Tuesday night and see for yourself. Anna shook her head. You don't need to be difficult. She half turned toward Evans. Detective Evans is a member of another chapter, so I have some idea of what A Better Way is about, but I want it in your words. Lopez sat back in her chair and snorted a short, irritated breath. Fine. We cover the same topics all chapters do. She held up her hand and started ticking off items from an invisible list. Private land ownership, food equality, gender equality, corporate monopolies, unions. She lowered her hand and looked at Anna. I could go on, but our fundamental goal is more individual empowerment. We don't believe the current way our country operates is good for people. It's good for corporations, and we want that to change. Anna narrowed her eyes. What about supporting the development of MMDs without fail-safes for consumer use? Lisa stiffened beside her. They hadn't had a chance to catch up on Daniel's information. Lopez hesitated, then proceeded with a measured tone. Yes, well, that is one cause, though not something all chapters like to talk about. It's one of the most controversial positions we take, but you must understand, we want to help people, not harm them. Lisa interjected before Anna could respond. How does removing the fail-safe help people? Her face reddened as she held up her weapon handle. Do you realize what this can do without a fail-safe? You don't want to live in that world. She turned to Evans. You know what I'm talking about, Detective. Evans shifted uncomfortably and opened her mouth to speak, but Anna cut her off. We need to hear from Miss Lopez. Lopez glared at Lisa. I understand very well what your weapon is capable of, but you, Agent Williams, you use it for fighting, but most people don't want to fight. We want to transform the world around us into something better. The failsafe makes your job easier, but it prevents us from doing things that can benefit humanity. She gestured at Anna. Talk to her. If she's learned enough about us to ask that question, she understands the goal. This is about food equality and making sure no one has to suffer for lack of real food. Anna gave her a dismissive wave. We aren't here to argue about removing the fail-safe. I only wanted to make the point that a better way has some dangerous ideas. Now that we're clear on that, I want to discuss Ben Jacobs. Lopez let out a long sigh as understanding dawned on her. I see. You want to link a better way to the bombing in Houston. Ben came to a few meetings, so you blame us. Typical. Well, ask your questions. Anna ignored the bitter edge in Lopez's voice. Ben regularly attended your meetups. We want to understand how he went from a peaceful family man to a terrorist in a matter of months, and why he'd target Councilwoman Shaw. I have no idea, Agent Flynn. I hardly knew Mr. Jacobs. Frankly, his wife was more involved with us. Mrs. Jacobs told us Shaw was a frequent topic of your meetups. She was, and it's not a crime. People have been displaced because of her and Feeney, but none of this has anything to do with what Mr. Jacobs did. We'd never support violence. We'll see about that. Reynolds tapped her shoulder, and she turned to face him. The warrant just came in. He gestured the document over to her. She looked back at Lopez. We're going to need access to your data lens and other systems here at the theater that are related to a better way. Lopez's eyes flickered to the tablet sitting on the table in front of her and pressed her lips into a thin line. You won't find anything. All I have for you are the standard resources readily available on the net. Anna gestured to assemble an evidence bag, then cocked her head at Lopez, who took the meaning and irritably took off her data lens and placed it on the desk. Anna made a second motion, and the tablet and data lens both lifted into the air and floated into the bag, which sealed once the items were secured. Anna put her arm through its strap and slipped it up over her shoulder. Simon, please connect to these and find out if there's anything on here implicating a better way in Ben's actions against Shaw. I'll scan them now. She returned to Lopez. What about vids? Did you record your meetings? Lopez nodded stiffly, then stood and walked over to what looked like a closet door. Yes, right in here. You took my data lens, so you'll need to open it. Anna rose to her feet and did so, the warrant giving her access to the building, even though this wasn't her jurisdiction. She stepped inside to find a small room only big enough for 2 people, which for the moment meant her and Lopez. A processing unit hugged the far wall with a mounted keyboard above it. Anna connected to it, but when she tried to view its data, she found nothing. Its data storage had been wiped clean. "Ms. Lopez, there are no recordings here." Lopez frowned. "That doesn't make any sense. There should be 14 months of vids." Anna crossed her arms and studied her. "You didn't delete them?" "No, definitely not." Worry lines spread across her face, the first demonstration of concern since they'd met. "I told you, there's nothing going on here. There's no reason to get rid of any of the recordings. What would they show?" Anna started to press her, but something in the woman's manner caused her to pause. Ever since they'd been talking, Lopez had been projecting an edge of defiance, resisting Anna at every step. But now the obstinance had disappeared, replaced by confusion. Simon interrupted her thoughts. "Anna, I found something." "What is it?" A document appeared on Anna's data lens, and as she read it, her eyes went wide. Excited gasps erupted from the office behind her. This was it, a letter written by Lopez and sent to Ben Jacobs with a detailed plan to assassinate Councilwoman Shaw.